Welcome to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. Your host, a behavioral scientist and bachelor, talks to leading experts and successful singles about living solo and living well. Travel more, make things, sleep in when you want to. Here's the playbook for the person who is unapologetically unattached. Now, please welcome Dr. Peter McGraw.
Welcome back. This episode examines one of the best television shows for singles, if not one of the best shows ever. I'm joined by Jen O'Donnell, and we talk to Danielle Soto, an expert on the Golden Girls. We discuss the broad appeal and cultural significance of the show, and end with a little bit of Golden Girls trivia. It's a lot of fun. You may have noticed that Solo has moved to a bi-weekly schedule. I'm giving myself some extra time to plan a reboot of the podcast. Look for a new format after the new year. In the meantime, please go to petermcgraw.org/solo to join our Slack channel to tell me what you like and don't like about the podcast. It'll be helpful as I contemplate changes. One last thing. Did you know that 75% of new listeners come from search? To that end, rating and reviewing the podcast on iTunes is critical to help new people find Solo. So if you haven't already, would you be willing to review the podcast? It helps a lot. Thank you, good solos. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Let's get started. Welcome to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. I'm Peter McGraw. Today's guest is Danielle Soto, aka Dr. Cheesecake. Danielle is a stand-up comedian, writer, and podcast host. She hosts the Dr. Cheesecake podcast, in which her guests explain a problem in their life, and Danielle solves it using an episode of The Golden Girls. She also writes, produces, and hosts Golden Girls trivia once a month in West Hollywood. Welcome, Danielle.
Hi, it's so nice to be here.
We're joined by a new guest co-host, Jen O'Donnell. Jen is a creative executive who has worked in development for television production companies in Los Angeles, creating and producing documentary series, reality docuseries, game shows, and a variety of unscripted TV formats. She listed a whole bunch of very fancy
stuff.
Yeah, like networks she's worked with.
Yeah, whatever. Networks, you get it.
She's also a stand-up comedian and also hosts and produces The Ladies' Room, a women's stand-up comedy show with a monthly residence at Westside Comedy Theater in Los Angeles. Welcome, Jen.
That's us. Thank you so much. My only regret is not providing cheesecake today.
Oh,
I feel like that would have really, just made it special.
Well, these two, I do a little mic check and I ask my guests what they had for breakfast. And let's just say these two don't need cheesecake right now, knowing what they had for breakfast.
But we didn't have cheesecake yet.
I didn't even make the funfetti cake that I ate for breakfast. It couldn't be sadder.
And so Danielle said she had funfetti cake for breakfast, and I immediately said, "You must be single."
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Coupled people don't have fun like that.
Oh, my goodness. This is outstanding. Well, I am thrilled to be here. And just a little background, if it's not obvious why we're having an episode on the Golden Girls, do you think it needs to be explained why I chose the Golden Girls as one of...
Oh, I don't think so. It's like, duh, I get it. Of course. Golden Girls.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone has seen the show, it's about 4 women who live in a house together in Miami. They are in their golden years. They're all grandmothers. And they still have very active sex life, dating life. They are, blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
And hilarity ensues.
You're going to make that sound wicked smart, right?
So smart.
But what brings them to all live together? That's the key, right? These are not 4 single women in their golden years living in a community. They live in the same house.
That's exactly right. So the 4 women, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm going to start very broad.
Please.
And just bring it in more specific. So the show premiered in 1985. The pilot was written by Susan Harris, who was previously a writer on Maude, which starred B. Arthur. She was also a writer on the television show Soap. It was directed by Jay Sandrich, who directed many episodes of The Mary Tyler Moore Show. Also, yes, a very strong single female character.
Yes.
So the pilot episode is the 3 women, Dorothy, played by B. Arthur, Rose, played by Betty White, and Blanche, played by Rue McClanahan, living in Rue McClanahan's house, which she previously had with her husband, who had since passed away. And in the pilot, Sophia, played by Estelle Getty, arrives on their doorstep. She is Dorothy's mother, and she comes in and says, the nursing home that I lived in burned down. And now
convenient.
So,
I'm going to live with you.
How many people died?
by the way, so dark. So dark.
Yes. There's this amazing line in the pilot that's like, they were sounding the fire alarms. Do you know what that does to hearts that only
Oh
beat a
my
few
God.
times a week? So that's it. There's 4 women living in a house together.
I read somewhere, I did a modicum of research for this, and I read somewhere, is this true, that the pilot got a standing ovation
I would believe it.
from the audience?
I would believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dope.
Isn't that amazing?
It's incredible.
Especially because how shaky pilots are often.
Yeah.
I think that up until that point, the number one show on television was The Cosby Show, and nothing was beating it. I mean, it was like at the top of the charts. And then all of a sudden, 4 little old ladies come along and they just like destroy it.
And they're still aging so much better.
Oh boy, howdy.
Indeed.
I love that. I mean, I didn't know that story about Sophia and the like nursing home burning down, and the idea that it and Rue's Blanche's husband died. So it I didn't realize how much tragedy the comedy kind of came from, even in just the premise of them being together.
Yeah, and there's like this nice balance between widows and divorcees.
There's
Right.
3 widows and 1 divorcee.
That's
is that
exactly right. Yes. So Rose,
Divorcees. Let's dust off that old term.
is that not a term?
I don't know. Is it? Is that? Are we not supposed to say divorcees in your solo thought or in your solo development?
Well, I don't want to digress too much,
Yeah.
but it does strike me as quite gendered.
Oh.
And
But
a lot
I would
of language.
call a man a divorcee.
What's that?
I would call a man
Me
a
too.
divorcee.
Oh, see, I didn't think that. I thought divorcee was a term for
No, I would
divorced
say like
women.
I
divorcita
can't
for.
tell
No, I'm
you.
kidding.
I can't tell you how many times I will just be in a conversation and use a word that people are like, A, nobody uses that word anymore, or B, that's only in Boston, and nobody says that outside of
You did say wicked earlier.
I know.
So, let's hold that. I maybe end up figuring this out and clarifying it, but I had always thought divorcee was gendered, was for women, and there often are. Okay, let's just do it. There's a lot of gendered language around singlehood,
Of course,
and much of it skews very negative for women.
Yes, because in order to basically rank and put us in rank and file,
Yes.
you know.
And so I'm just on the lookout for it.
Yeah.
but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
I appreciate the lookout. Good looking
Yeah,
out.
Good looking out for sure.
For us single gals.
He's tall. It's helpful.
Yes. How's the weather up?
So 3.
3 widows. In the pilot, we find out that Estelle Getty's character, Sophia, is a widow. I think I'm just going to focus on the character names just for simplicity. But
Yeah,
Blanche is a widow, Rose is a widow, Sophia is a widow, and then Dorothy is divorced from like this total, as they say it, a yutz. He is just the worst. Cheated on her left, right, and sideways. But they have 2 kids together and grandchildren together. So he keeps popping up throughout the series. And it's kind of like this fun thing that people with a difficult ex can relate to and find humor from. Because I think so many times the relationship that people maintain with their ex-husbands, ex-wives is very painful. And there's a lot of anger there. But it's kind of nice that Dorothy and Stan have this dynamic where they still have love for each other, even though they don't want to be together, despite a few episodes where they wonder, do we belong together? And ultimately, no.
Yeah.
Right.
Also, you'd ruin the show.
Right.
And it's probably good to see her have one of them is sort of single by choice in a way, right? And I don't know exactly with Dorothy's storyline, like if she was the one who initiated the divorce. Do you know?
Well, he left her for
Okay.
a flight attendant named Chrissy.
Yeah, he's really despicable, isn't he?
Yeah.
Stanley.
But he keeps trying to win her back over the series and like buy her gifts. And,
Right. So she does. That's because I'm like, she does have choices. Like there's moments where it's like, should I go, could I make this work? And she chooses instead to live with her group instead.
Yeah, there's definitely a few episodes where the women walk away from something possibly fun and possibly enjoyable because they know that ultimately this is just not the life that they want.
Yeah.
So they're good role models.
Yep, I agree.
And so this show went 7 seasons.
Correct.
And why would such a wonderful show like this end?
B. Arthur was done doing it. B. Arthur did not want to do another season of The Golden Girls. She was ready for it to end. And so the 3 other actresses signed on to do a spinoff called Golden Palace, where they buy a hotel and they run it with Don Cheadle and Cheech Marin.
Amazing.
Oh my goodness. This sounds
Why do I
like
not know
a
about
terrible idea.
Oh my God, I love
It's like
every
a fever
minute
dream
of it.
that I had. It's real. And it's not the Golden Girls. And a lot of Golden Girl fans are like, ugh, Golden Palace. It's not a bad show.
Okay.
It's got its moments for sure.
Not a fever dream from eating old funfetti cake. It's
No.
actually
Yes. And if anyone's going to have such a thing, it would be me.
yeah.
That is, that's incredible. So I have to ask this now before we get into the real meat of the podcast. And I sent this to you. I sent a few notes and I was like, what's up with B. Arthur? Like, she seems like this sort of divisive character when it comes to the show.
Are you asking about B. Arthur, the actress?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So
I do know a bit about this.
Yeah. Do you want to kick it off? Should I?
Here's just what I do know. Maybe this is
Because we're blaming her for the end of this 7-year run.
which I
right?
would say is 7 years. That's a
It's
perfect
true.
length of a show to me. If for a show like that, I don't know. I would take more episodes. Former Marine, right?
Yes.
She was. Yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
She was a driver in the Marines.
That's
yes.
right.
Yeah.
Not to be messed with.
Yep. I guess that would be just sort of my theory that she does what she wants to do and that's it.
Oh, okay. So here's
No.
Oh, can I add one thing?
by all means.
I know that she chafed at some of the jokes that came at her expense at some point
Okay.
that I heard. This is what the Wikipedia tells me. And that's all I know beyond that.
So I'll start from the top. So the pilot was written and it was being shopped around Hollywood. And in the pilot, the part of Dorothy says a B. Arthur type. And so B. Arthur's manager calls her and says, "Hey, I hear you're doing a new pilot." And she's like, "I am not doing a new pilot. I have no idea what you're talking about." So she sent the script and she doesn't want to do it. She has already done Maude. She did her sitcom run. You know, Maude was a spinoff from All in the Family. She was good.
Got it.
And so Rue McClanahan.
She made her money.
Right. So the creators of the show asked Rue McClanahan, who had played Vivian on Maude with B. Arthur. They were old friends and had worked together. Please call B. Arthur and please ask her to be on this show.
Girl.
So
It sounds like the role was written for her.
it most certainly was. Absolutely. So Rue McClanahan calls B. Arthur and she goes, "Betty White's going to be on this show. I'm going to be on this show. It's the best pilot you will ever read. Are you crazy? You have to do this show." And Betty White had just come off of Mary Tyler Moore playing Sue Ann Nivens, who was like a big giant slut.
Love it.
And can I say slut?
Yes,
Okay.
I actually have a note here about sluts. So
Okay,
yes.
perfect.
Just says sluts. Big
Great.
big note. Just like underlined, capitalized. I keep looking at
Wow, all the text on that paper
it.
says
Just
slut.
a billion times. Yeah. Weird.
All slut and no play make Jack a dull boy. So then, so Betty White had played Sue Ann Nivens, slut, and Rue McClanahan had played Vivian, who was like this kind of ditzy character. So B's response was, "Rue, I have no interest in playing Maude and Vivian meet Sue Ann Nivens.
Okay.
Don't want to do this show."
Yeah.
And Rue goes, no, you got it all wrong. I'm going to be the nympho. She's going to be the dummy.
Ah, they switched it.
Yes, they switched it. And
Fun.
so B. Arthur goes, that's very interesting. And she went into audition, but, barely an audition. I mean, she had the part.
Yes.
And so then they found Estelle Getty, who is coming off Broadway. She was in Torch Song Trilogy.
Okay.
And she had played like this overbearing mother type. So, perfect
And
for
she
Sophia.
really helps make the show.
Oh my gosh, yes. I think that even if you've never seen an episode of The Golden Girls, but you see that Sophia character, you know instantly something fresh is coming
Yeah.
out of that mouth.
I mean,
think
just like
so
the
iconic.
best roast jokes in the entire
absolutely.
she just roasts people and it's so funny.
It
so
is.
good.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really great.
So B. Arthur didn't initially want to do the show. She did 7 seasons of the show. And then there's also a lot of talk about her attitude towards Betty White on the show.
Oh, I didn't know this.
Fans know that B. Arthur and Betty White didn't get along. There's rumors that B didn't like Betty. And from what I've heard from writers and directors on the show, it wasn't so much that they didn't like each other, their personalities, but B. Arthur was a stage actress. She was trained in theater. And so in between takes, she would just stay in character. Whereas Betty White was an entertainer. She had come off of game shows,
Makes total
Password
sense.
and all those. So in between takes, she would talk to the audience. She would fool around. She would throw props. And so B just didn't like Betty's style.
Got it.
Right.
Okay.
And I'm sure
stage.
if people don't really, if they're not aware, say you're in the audience, say you're even in the production crew and you don't quite understand that dynamic or difference, and they could just be totally respecting the way that they work and it's fine. But like you know, 20 people would leave that studio audience and be like, what was going on?
Right.
Well,
there.
and also, it's just become so easy to like Betty White.
True.
Totally.
But yeah, I mean, her character is set up for that. Like it, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And
In general, it is.
Right.
Yeah.
okay. And so she just kind of got to the end and was like,
Yeah,
I'm done.
I think it was hard to get her to do a 7th season, and then she did the 7th season, and then that was it. And now we have Golden Palace, one season of good old Golden Palace,
Luckily.
with Don Cheadle and Cheech Marin.
that's outstanding. By the way, I'm not being critical of her. And also I do like that. I'd rather something end early than end too late.
Yeah.
There's
Oh,
no
for sure.
There's no jumping the shark
Right.
when it comes to the Golden Girls. And to be honest, probably part of the reason why it's adored is you watch it today, all 7 seasons are good.
Mm-hmm.
You never get to a point where you're like, ugh, and it also probably left you wanting a little bit more.
What I love about the Golden Girls too is, like you're saying, the jokes stay relevant. It's still funny after all this time, but it was also ahead of its time in terms of like social justice issues, and they still apply today, which is sad in some ways that we
Right.
haven't made more progress, but it's also inspiring that, we were always aware that certain things were unfair. There was injustices, and they taught us that through this vessel of comedy really well, which is a great way to learn about what's going on in the world when you're not being lectured. And that's what I just love about these old television shows, and why I'm such a big fan of like the Norman Lear era television, because they taught us about stuff. They taught us about racism, sexism, homophobia, even trans rights back in the day. It's wild.
They tussled with topics that,
but never at the sacrifice of the comedy. It always remained funny.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit, and in terms of these shows holding up, just to preview, we watched a couple episodes, and we're going to talk about them, and they do hold up. Very
Yay.
very
Yeah, I
nicely.
would love to talk about the vessel of comedy.
I know. God, I'm such a nerd.
No, I love it. I love it.
So as an aside, it's the only show that my grandmother regularly watched. Like, it was a focus of when we visited. That was a show that we always made sure was on, because it was a show that grandma wanted versus what grandpa wanted.
I love that. And it's so nice. I always hear people tell me I have great memories of watching this show with my grandmother or my mother. And it's just such a staple of our culture.
Yeah.
Yes. It's a show the whole family can watch. I
Totally.
think. So let's talk about the cultural significance of the Golden Girls. And I want to get into some of the social justice stuff that you were talking about, where it comes up on Solo, and it comes up a lot in my conversation since I've started this project, is, if you're a Solo listener, if you're single and you think you're going to remain single for a long period of time, perhaps forever, invariably the topic of like, well, what about when you're old comes up? Aren't you going to have someone who's going to take care of you, whether it be children or a partner? Of course, some of that thinking is incredibly fallacious, just out of the, like, counting on your kids, that's a risky bet.
Sure.
And then counting on
or your dogs. Your dog
fur babies.
Fur babies, that's the one.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then counting on a partner, obviously, especially if you're a woman, given the demographics of women outliving men.
Yeah.
So even if your plan is to have a family in order to take care of you, it's not always a good thing. But if you're going it solo, then you certainly need to have a little bit of a plan. I'm already formulating a bit of a plan if I'm lucky enough to get there, older years.
I've already chosen which bridge I'm going to jump off to.
Mine involves getting euthanized in Switzerland, looking at the Alps.
Yeah, and
That's
we're
a
going to
good
do
one.
it live on television. He's already promised me exclusivity. So,
There is a Golden Girls episode about assisted suicide. I'll just throw that out there now.
I actually didn't know that.
Well, we should talk about that. So, but what ends up happening a lot is people say, well, I'd really like a Golden Girls kind of scenario where me and my friends, rent condos in the same building, describe some sort of assisted living, community living, co-living, co-housing situation in which they are all together there. And clearly, because they say a Golden Girls scenario, they have a model from this show that I don't know if exists anywhere else. At least not at that time period.
Not at that time period.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't say so. I'm sorry to say this, and it's so dark, but when you talk about people having children and getting married just to have some security in their old age, it's like, that's not how death works.
And also, it's the wrong set of motivations, but you'd be surprised.
Oh, I believe you. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's like you can get married at 30. Your husband can die at 32. You do not know. That's not security.
What if you marry somebody who eats cake for breakfast?
Oh,
what?
gosh. I'm having enough trouble getting a date. I don't need your help.
We almost had a spit take.
I just took a sip of water. Jen almost got me for the first time ever.
Almost first spit take. Almost.
Oh, God. I'm healthy, I swear.
Well, when I think of the cultural significance of seeing women who are older live together and have choices and have the life that they want to have, community, so powerful, right?
Yeah.
I think that a lot of people, when they talk about a Golden Girls scenario, I think for a lot of people, the idea of being single or being alone or being solo, I think a lot of people, and for good reason, because there's not enough resources and examples, think it's scary. And nobody wants to be alone. And I think even in terms of marriage and this idea that you are having this backup, like a partner or a family or a network, I think that even structurally, it's all built for it, right? Like church and state are like, taxes get married, community get married. It's like it's structurally like this is the model. And so going against it is really difficult. And especially so when there's not examples that are prevalent. And Golden Girls, for some reason, has been just the only touchstone to that.
Yeah. The only other show that comes to mind that is similar, and I think this is because, based off a lot of influence from the Golden Girls, is Hot in Cleveland.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which was with Valerie Bertinelli, Jane Leaves, and she's so amazing. She was on Just Shoot Me.
I'll look.
Wendy Malick. And Betty White. Yeah. So they live in a house in Cleveland together, and it's 4 ladies living in a house together. So, same deal.
Yeah. The male version of this, The Odd Couple.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right? That's the male
Or
version.
Perfect Strangers.
Yep.
Oh, yes.
Weren't they both single?
I don't actually know.
Balky.
But they were younger, though.
Yes.
So
True.
At least The Odd Couple, those
Yeah.
guys they were in their 50s, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other cultural influence it has, I think, is, and this was explained to me by people who worked on the show, it had never even occurred to me, but there's a huge gay following of the Golden Girls.
That's right. Yeah.
Gay men love this show. And it's because, according to the creators, it's this idea about the chosen family. Mm-hmm. So many gay men, sadly, are rejected by their biological families because they don't agree with the lifestyle or the quote unquote choice. Mm-hmm. And so they find friends who become like siblings, who become like their moms, their dads. And that's really important to them. So that structure is a good role model for
Makes
knowing
total
that
sense.
Your friends can become family.
And why you have such a
blood
popular trivia night in West Hollywood.
That's
also.
exactly what, right. I immediately went to West Hollywood. I didn't even consider another location for Golden Girls trivia.
Yeah. For people who aren't familiar, West Hollywood has a huge gay population.
Boys Town.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
It's the only place I feel attractive when I visit.
You can feel attractive here in this room.
Oh, that's very nice. This idea of co-living, let's lean into the co-living part of it a little bit. And I want to cover some of the other things is, I think that matters, so what Jen was talking about, how people sort of see the risk of being single
Yes.
Right. The risk is really prominent. How are you going to take care of yourself and all these kinds of things? I think it's interesting because there's such an asymmetry because people don't, in my opinion, consider the risks of partnering up enough.
No, right.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like how devastating that can be to your wealth, right? When it comes to divorce, for example.
Yep.
To, the amount of abuse that happens within relationships. And even the fact that like people just take off, you know what I mean? And so on. And
I will say for women in particular, marriage, raw deal. Ultimately, like your partner is the one that's most likely to kill you.
Yeah, statistically.
And and just in terms of sharing household duties, I mean, yes, and not enough people I think consider it. Which is what you're saying. Because they're focused on the
rewards.
Right. And I think there is just so much more, I guess, camaraderie and troubleshooting with people who have the same problems that it's almost like the choice to like opt into that community.
And the pressure to do that.
Yeah. I think the worst part of picking a partner that you're not compatible with or you don't belong with is that it shuts you out to the right people. It completely puts up a roadblock. And I would rather be single, do my own thing, have my own fun, spend time with my friends and family and, gain emotional support from all those people than just be with someone just to have someone to bring to a wedding. Like, come on.
You're gonna have a lot more fun alone at a wedding.
100%. Yeah.
Unless it's just like a perfect date. That's,
The caterer's going to be single. Okay. Like, you're not going to be the only person there single.
There's going to be leftover food. Like, that's a good score.
Why do you think I keep Ziploc bags in my purse?
My goodness. By the way, Danielle is young. She sounds like an old lady at this moment, but she's a young woman.
That is too good.
But she is wearing all of the Golden Girls names on her shirt.
This was a gift from my friend Joe and Raquel. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Joe and Raquel.
So this co-living situation is interesting. I have a good friend. It was always more his backup plan than mine, which was that when we got to a certain age, we were going to buy a duplex.
Cool.
And he would stay on one side, I would stay on the other side. He's now since remarried. So,
boo.
So that
leave her.
that joke.
You can't have two people living in a duplex.
Yes. It's not a true plex.
Yeah. So I don't think she's probably on board with that plan, but nonetheless, but I do love this idea. I love this idea of giving people a model to live together.
Yeah.
And it's certainly, one of the things about the show is it's a vibrant household.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
It's filled with energy and things happening and they're living rich lives.
Yep. Supporting each other, exactly. They're having an enriched experience together.
Yep. And I think that's sort of the inspiration for Golden Palace because they're like, let's open a hotel. Our house is basically a hotel already.
Right.
I can't tell you how many episodes there are where two of the girls have to sleep in the same bed because Uncle Angelo is in town or my best friend Jean came to town. So like they're always hosting. There's always things happening. Yeah. You're exactly right.
You're not allowed to say Golden Palace anymore.
Because I want to watch it that bad.
This is like the 7 words you can't say on the radio.
1, Golden Palace.
The GP word.
In Cheaters, in that episode of Cheaters that you had us watch, I thought it was interesting that...
This is season 5, episode 22. Danielle gave us homework.
Yes.
That's one of the episodes.
Yep.
Yes.
And I thought both choices of episodes were brilliant, by the way.
Thank you. There were really so many to pick from.
Give you a range.
So I was unfair to you all because this is actually the second part of a 2-part episode. In season 1...
Wow, stands alone, though.
I know. In season 1, Dorothy dates this man and she's really falling for him. Like his name's Glenn O'Brien and he's the gym teacher at her high school. And she's a substitute teacher. And she really falls for him.
Thank you for clarifying.
That's super confusing.
Just like, just things to know.
How old is this guy?
That's a different show altogether. That's called A Teacher. And that's a different show. So... she starts dating him and she really, really likes him. And she's like, this could be the one. And then she finds out he's married. And she continues to see him. She continues to date him. And that's that episode. So this is the second part of that, literally 4 years later. And they bring back Glenn O'Brien, the character, not the actor. But the character of Glenn O'Brien comes back because he's since got divorced. And so he calls up Dorothy and he's like, I'm single now. And it's this question of like, do I go back to this guy who cheated on his wife with me? Like, I did have a good time with him.
And the other Golden Girls had strong opinions about this.
Right. Yeah. Rose is like, don't do it. Keep your self-respect. And then Blanche is like, self-respect is for losers like Rose.
Yeah. I laughed so hard at that. I was like, she's mean. Like,
honestly, I'm
mean,
like, that is how I live my life. Anytime I have to make a difficult dating decision, I'm like, self-respect is for losers like Rose. And I do whatever I want. But yeah, and then ultimately, I don't know, do I spoil the end of the episode?
Yes.
At the end of the episode, she decides to walk away because she just doesn't feel like this is the right move for her. And she's afraid maybe she'll never be able to trust him.
Yeah. And it's also season 5 and she's not ready to go till season 7 anyways. So
exactly. We can't tie this up.
Right. She had 2 more seasons to date.
I did think it was interesting, and I was sort of imagining the writers writing the scene, right, when she goes to his apartment. So he is recently divorced, and his apartment is like modest, clean, but like not much, right? It's very like a bachelor pad temporary zone. And it did strike me as interesting, and the whole idea and what she ended up kind of determining was that like he just wanted to be with somebody.
Yes.
He did not want to be alone. And it didn't matter that it was her. It was like, I need to not be in this, like, you know, basically crash pad temporary place. I need to be with somebody.
I think you nailed it.
Yeah.
Because she even says to him, like, maybe you're only being with me because I'm at the top of the list. And if that's the case, then I shouldn't be on the list at all.
Yeah.
I see.
And so thinking about even had he had a duplex scenario with a friend, right?
Okay.
Had he had friends to live with, or had, you know, it's like
if he was living a rich life.
If he was living a rich life, then they
or
would
dare I
have
say
been,
a remarkable life.
Yeah, exactly. And so it actually just, and I think because I had the lens of this conversation, I thought about him as a solo or as not wanting to be alone. And so what the choices that he made for that compared to what she had, which was something that she didn't want to walk away from, that she didn't want to compromise on. So
yes.
And there was a B plot within the cheaters theme.
And it's so good. I loved this plot so much. Okay.
Oh God, wait, don't tell me I can do it. Wait, I'll figure it out.
I'll just say one thing and then you'll be like, of course. And I laughed so hard when I saw it and I was like, this is a future Halloween costume. A shopping nun.
Oh, of course. Yes. Yes. Like, where they get conned.
Yeah.
Yes.
The visual of a nun with a shopping bag. Hilarious.
Smoking a cigarette.
Hilarious. Yes. And even in terms of what you're saying too, of the sort of, the social justice, but also the, you know, the vessel of comedy for lessons. Like this actually was like a really funny PSA for elderly scams.
Yeah.
And teaching, you know, how it works, but also that you should come forward and not be ashamed because that's how you'll stop it from happening. And I was like, they're geniuses.
Yeah.
But tell the audience what happened.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll get the scam a bit wrong. And what's hilarious is that Rose is the one who's like, of course this is the scam, which the irony of it is brilliant. That
right.
She's like, well, of course they work in twos. It's like super funny. And you're like, you're dumb. What? So yeah, basically a guy finds a wallet, pretends to find a wallet. He basically says, okay, if we...
there's like a couple $1,000s in there.
Yeah, there's
a lot of money
$2,000 in there.
Which, by the way, in 1990 was like $100,000.
Yeah, that's a good chunk, right? Yeah. So it's like, it's a few months rent, right?
Right. So they're
it's like $5,000.
Yeah, it's 100 and then, no, it's a couple hundred and then it ends up being 2,000 because they all put up enough. They go to the bank and they put up enough money. So
they all put up 2,000 of their own money to show... you know,
good
mutual
faith.
good faith, which was advice by a shopping nun.
Yes.
Oh, we should just ask someone what we should do.
Yes.
Oh, let's ask
this nun with a shopping
put
bag.
it in a bank, and they're like, well, whose bank? And she's like, well, open an account together, and then you can all put in your money. And then when they took out the money, it was just pieces of paper. So they got scammed.
And they didn't realize that the nun and this guy with the wallet were working together. So it was like...
there's a tiny thing missing here, and it was just the like... well, what do we do with this? And the idea is, well, we should put an ad in the classifieds, and if no one claims it, then we can split the money.
Yes.
Right. So they're just, and so then this idea of like, okay, let's all put money into this account.
Yep.
So now we're all on the same page.
And at least we'll make some interest in the meantime.
And I think the nun says that.
Yeah. And they go, we should give it to the lost and found. And they're like, you're going to give that kind of money to a guy who gets paid $4 to watch an umbrella? Like, what?
Yes. Like all like very reasonable things that you would say, right? But like, yeah. So just brilliant because like in my grandparents at one point were almost victims of
this happens so much.
And it happens so often. And yes, there's a lot of shame involved if you don't talk about it. And if you do, there's a lot of power to be had because you're going to stop it and make people aware of it.
There's a group at my synagogue called the Wisdom Circle. And it's a group of people in their 80s and 90s. And they get together for like Torah study. But sometimes they do events such as trivia with me. I have hosted trivia for people in their 80s and 90s. It was so fun. But they also did a day where a group came and performed skits about con artists and scammers. And one of the ways that elderly people often get scammed is on dating sites.
Yes.
So they're on there looking for a partner. And then people go, I'd love to talk to you on my phone, but I can't pay my phone bill. Like, can you send me some money? And then they do it. And then the person disappears. It's very sad.
And then they're like, but I have companionship and I have love. It's like, it's just the word.
It's too easy to get, caught up in it.
Yes. So before we get to the next episode,
let's just take a moment to be really bummed out.
Wow, I'm having a great time.
Some of the other topics that they tussled with. So besides like just the whole idea of the show. So you talked about euthanasia.
Yes. Oh, yeah. So there is an episode where Sophia goes out with her friend. They just come back from a funeral and it was this woman's like absolute best friend. And Sophia's just trying to be a good friend to her and support her through like this grieving process. So they go to dinner and this woman's in like a great mood. And she's like, why do you feel so good today? That's awesome. And she goes, I've decided to kill myself. And I want you to be there when I do it.
Okay.
And so Sophia goes home and she's thinking about it. And ultimately the decision that she comes to is like, she's going to do it whether I'm there or not. So why should she be alone? And then the night that it's supposed to happen, Sophia just insists that this does not go down. Like, just, you can come over every week. I'll spend more time with you. I'll make sure you don't feel lonely. And if I'm not home, you can always talk to Rose.
And that's when she does it. No.
And then she convinces her to continue her life. And it's a really touching moment. But, again, still funny.
Yeah.
You know what? I have to say for the sake of it, because it just hit me like, duh. Grace and Frankie is a pretty good modern example.
Oh, yes, that's right.
And Grace and Frankie, and it only triggered it because they had a euthanasia episode.
Yeah.
It wasn't Grace or Frankie. So,
okay.
No. But they had a close friend and who did end up going through with it.
Wow.
So, interesting evolution, I think, conversation-wise. Yeah. But yeah, Grace and Frankie, absolutely. That just hit me as like, that at least is something that stands out as a really, I would say, the closest modern example of this.
Yeah, that's a good point. I thought about that.
Yeah,
that's the Netflix show, I think, right?
Yeah, you can watch it on Netflix.
For the Golden Girls, the social justice issues that they tackled were like, some that come to mind are, assisted suicide, gay marriage, HIV and AIDS.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
There was an episode on that. Gambling addiction, pill addiction. The list goes on. Age discrimination, sexual harassment. It was so ahead of its time. I mean, things that...
In one in particular, a racism episode sticks out with Blanche being from the South and her being like coming to sort of terms. I don't remember the episode that well, but like it was... An episode.
So I'm not allowed to talk about it anymore, but there's an episode of a certain show where Blanche is really excited about the Confederate flag.
Yes.
And
that's the one I'm thinking.
Someone who works at the hotel with her, Don Cheadle, and her kind of butt heads about it. But that's a different show. There's an episode where Dorothy's son brings home his fiance, and she is an older black woman.
Okay,
and so it's not so much that Dorothy's upset that she's black, as the age gap is what really gets her. There's also an episode where Blanche is applying to be part of the Sisters of the Confederacy.
That's the one I was thinking.
This is my favorite episode of the Golden Girls.
Really?
It's my favorite episode.
Why so?
Because she's applying to be a sister of the Confederacy or daughters of the Confederacy. And she has to go through her lineage. And so Dorothy's helping her. And she's like, this is so archaic. Why are you doing this? Who cares? Like, blah, blah, blah. And she goes, I'm 100% Southern. I'm 100% Southern. And so they're going through this family tree and they find that her great-great-grandmother was born just north of Atlanta in Buffalo.
I remember this because that's where I was born.
And she goes, oh, and also did I mention her last name was Feldman? And she's like, oh my God, I can't be Jewish. And it's so funny. She still tries to get into the Confederacy.
And they won't have her.
They won't have her. And now she's like
perfect.
She's
perfect.
like, you small-minded Peckawoods aren't real Southerners.
Yep.
So good. It's so funny. The entire episode is perfect.
But it's interesting because it makes her become an outsider to understand, and it's just an interesting journey. But yeah, again, ahead of its time because those conversations weren't being had.
Yeah.
This is a great segue into the next episode that I want to discuss, which you gave us as homework. Season 6, episode 10. Girls just want to have fun, ... before they die. And one of the things that struck me about these episodes, and then just in general kind of perusing, is how much sex was a topic within this show, which I think goes against a lot of stereotypes and so on. And obviously it's great fodder for comedy, but also it's realistic in the sense that just because people get to a certain age doesn't mean that they don't stop having those drives and motivations and experiences.
Need to use protection. That's a big part too.
There's an episode where they buy condoms.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. Look, I've heard the stories about some of these retirement communities.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes, I have.
So before we tee up what happens in this episode, I'm curious, why was this one assigned to us?
So it was so hard to pick because there are just endless episodes that would have been perfect. But the reason I went with this one is because it's particularly funny. Season 6 is my favorite season because there's a lot of advice being given throughout the episode. And I feel like that is such an overwhelming part of being single that you get so much advice, whether it's unsolicited or solicited. Whenever people hear that I'm single, it almost feels like that's their cue to be like, okay, here's what you do. I didn't ask for this.
Unsolicited advice. Yeah.
Yes. And so, throughout the episode, Blanche is giving the other girls a lot of advice because she feels she's very, very experienced in the realm of dating, which she is, her reputation speaks for itself. But I think the thought of am I dating because I don't want to be alone? Do I miss hearing I love you? Is it that I really like this person? Am I just trying to get my rocks off? Also, there's all these games you have to play when you're single. In the episode, Rose is sort of being coy with her boyfriend and not being her authentic self. And a lot of times that is advice given to me. Don't be your authentic self. People are like, just be yourself. And I'm like, it's working. But to be you can't text back too soon.
Yeah.
Or you got to let them lead the way. Men like to chase. And it's can we just not? Can you just be into me and I'm into you? And then we get in this hot tub and then XYZ goes down.
So what happens in this episode?
So in this episode, let's start with Sophia. Sophia has a date with this man and his name's Tony and he is a dreamboat and she likes him so much.
Oh yeah. And he has a nice apartment.
Yeah,
there's
I like how you two picked up on, actually not you two. Jen, Jen picked up on the set design.
Yeah. What's he about? You're this guy has a globe. Okay. That's a worldly man.
Glenn O'Brien, not a great apartment.
No.
Tony Del Vecchio, great apartment.
Catch.
I have some episodes for you with beautiful apartments, but we'll get to that later. I'll be on a podcast about apartments and talk about the Golden Girls.
Sitcom apartments.
Yes. So Tony Del Vecchio is a dreamboat. She's really into him. And Blanche is like, I think you should sleep with him. And Dorothy's like, what? No, my mother does not need to do that. Get to know him, maybe 3 or 4 months. She's like, look who's giving away time here.
Oh, yes. I wrote this down because I died. She's like, this will get you laid in no time. And she's like, good, because that's all the time we have.
Yes. So Blanche starts giving her advice about what to wear and how to approach the date and all this just to, get Sophia laid. Meanwhile, there is a drought in St. Olaf. And if you don't know the show, you have no idea what I'm talking about.
By the way, I found that confusing because I don't watch the show.
You do have to kind of know the lore of
Rose is from a town called St. Olaf, Minnesota. And it is a town of idiots. Like everyone in the town is stupid. Things make no sense.
It's the opposite of Lake Wobegon.
Yeah, I don't know what that's from.
Lake Wobegon is the place where everybody's above average. Everybody's good looking, everybody's smart. And
complete opposite.
This is on the other side of the mountain.
The encyclopedia salesman carries 52 copies of the encyclopedia, and Dorothy's like, why do they carry 52? And she's like, for balance. She's like, why don't they just carry 13 in each hand? And she's like, I have to make a phone call. Like, everyone's so dumb. And so there's a drought in St. Olaf. And to fix it, they ask every St. Olafian to be celibate until the rains come, except for Ulf the Umbrella King, because he has suffered enough.
Yes, I remember that joke, yes.
So Rose has a boyfriend named Miles, who's in many, many episodes. And she is going to be honest with him that she can't have sex. And Blanche is like, no, don't tell him you can't have sex. Just use it to your advantage. Get him to be really obsessed with you. He's going to do your laundry. He's going to do all these things for you. And, it's going to be really beneficial to your relationship to just kind of like play around the fact that you don't want to have sex. So again, advice, maybe not the best advice for Rose, but nevertheless, Blanche thinks she's an expert, and that's what happens in the episode. Sophia goes off with Tony Del Vecchio and sleeps with him, and then he doesn't call her in his beautiful apartment, and then he doesn't call her, or
No, but she says,
"Oh, this is so important." Yes,
she says to him, "I love you,"
and he says, "Thank you."
He says, "Thank you."
Classic.
Says thank you, and then he says something, and then she of course gets agitated.
He says, "I care for you."
I care for you,
and she says, "That's something you say to a goat."
That's fun.
Which I actually appreciated that moment in time because he was being authentic and honest.
That's true.
He could have just said to her,
lied
I
and
love
then
you.
Drop her, so it's not awkward.
Right.
Yes, that's right. And so yes, that's what.
But then she feels ghosted because he doesn't call, he doesn't follow up, and then she's trying not to call him, or she's like, I'm going to go to his apartment, and Blanche is like, don't do that, don't look desperate, and she's just. I think so many people can relate to what's going on here. That like you like someone, you try to move a little too fast, and then you scare them off.
Yes.
And not being authentic about what page you're actually on, perhaps.
Right. Yes. Or, just feeling overzealous. You
get excited sometimes, especially when you're single and maybe you don't want to be single. Or you just, it can be tough out there, right? Finding a good match, finding a good partner, and then someone at first blush seems so great.
Yeah.
And so it's natural to get a little bit zealous.
Yeah. Totally. Also confusing sex and enjoyment of sex with affection and love.
That it doesn't have, by the way, some people think sex and love go together hand in hand, and some people believe that they can be separated.
To all the single men out there, I am not one of those people. Call me 617-875.
Wait, which of the two are you not?
Oh, I can separate them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure.
I don't say I love you in bed with men.
What if they have a globe?
Oh my God. What if they have cheesecake?
One of the things about that show and even other shows' episodes is this term, and you had asked earlier, this term slut that comes up.
Yeah.
Whether it be as a punchline or in some other way. Is there something special about that word with regard to the Golden Girls?
I don't think it's negative. I think that it is.
I agree. Yeah.
This wonderful episode where Rose reveals that she's had 56 boyfriends in her life. And everyone's like, what? You had 56 boyfriends before you got married? Like, that's a lot. We never knew that about you. And then they call Rose a big slut. And Blanche gets offended. She goes, I'm the biggest slut. She's like her. She likes being the slut. Like, that's her claim to fame, is that she's a slut. And I don't think it's a negative thing, but I think they also use it to, poke fun at her.
Yeah, and I think she also has power over it too. It's like she's choosing to use it. She's choosing to say it. I think that that's powerful. I agree
with that.
I wrote myself a note that said, count boyfriends. That's just something I'm going to do.
Oh, cool.
Before I get married.
Good idea.
I'm just curious.
I'm into it.
And No, at one point, yeah, because Sophia, when she's in bed with Tony, he goes like, "Where did you learn that?"
This is post coitus.
And she's like, "I live with a slut." And I just like died. It was so funny.
Who taught a nice young Sicilian woman to do all those things? Yeah. She's like, "I live with a slut." Yeah.
That's so good.
There's an episode where they meet Burt Reynolds.
Oh, really?
He walks in the door and he goes, "Oh, are these the roommates you told me about?" Sophia's like, "Yeah," and he goes, "Which one's the slut?" And at the same time, all three go, "I am."
Oh, so good.
It's
so good.
incredible. And also in my memory, like going through, I don't recall a time where a man called one of the women a slut.
Ah, that's interesting.
And I think that's important.
Yeah.
I do too.
Yes.
Yeah, I do too.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, I love co-opting language, and I think that's an important. You can rob it of its power in that way.
Yes.
Anything else stand out to either of you about that episode? Besides just overall how entertaining and funny it was.
Like it is just like the cadence of the jokes just blow my mind. Just as a person who writes comedy,
Totally.
Like, it blows my mind every time. Even when you were talking about like the unsolicited advice and people giving advice, like Blanche goes like, "When I say jump, you say on who?" It's literally just like set up, punch, set. Like it's just
every 10
so
seconds
funny.
There's a laugh.
And I think really it just like paints such a picture of what an enriched life could be.
I agree.
You know,
it breaks so many stereotypes of thinking, and so I had mentioned my grandmother earlier and how much it was an important show for her. And in many ways, as I sit here and think about this, how much their lives are in contrast to what her life was like.
Yeah.
So she was married. She was a grandmother. She was with her husband still. She obviously, not obvious to you, but to me, like sweetest woman in the world. Like nothing bad about her. So pure, so wonderful, so supportive.
Was she a slut? No, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
No. Yeah, I get it. But it's interesting to see this sort of, she was an old woman.
Yes.
And a little bit frail. And as I said, very sweet, very passive, though, also, with this kind of in this very patriarchal structure.
Yeah. Had a life that was probably at a lot of turns really chosen for her, or this was the best option at the time. And you did.
And my grandfather, I adored the man. And I think he was overall a good husband, given the norms of the time, kind of a thing. And he was a wonderful father and grandfather, in many ways was a father to me. But to see in contrast to this woman who was kind of passive and, I don't want to use the word weak, but, as I said, frail and so on, contrasted with these women on the screen who are robust and big
it's
and
aspirational.
Funny.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Do you think that she viewed it as like a fantasy almost of like what life would be?
I don't know. It's a really, it's interesting because I never talked to my grandmother about those kinds of things.
You knew her as a grandmother. You didn't know her as a woman.
That's exactly right. While I knew more about my grandfather, and we would go off and do things alone sometimes and so on, I didn't have that sense of her beyond that limited role.
Yeah.
An important role, but in sort of limited in terms of full scope of her being.
It is weird when you grow older and you realize your parents are humans and like you kind of realize their flaws and you hopefully forgive them for those. But the grandparents, because of the age gap, it's not like I never got to the point where my grandparents were imperfect.
Yes.
So I still see my grandmother, even like I was thinking about her today. The description you gave of your grandmother could be mine. She was so sweet, so kind, best heart, just the nicest, sweetest, most loving person. And I'm like, what was going on in her personal life? What was happening when she was dating? I never got to know her in that light.
I have to thank you both because it's actually helping me reframe a few things that it's actually for me, it's been a gift, I think, to be able to know things about my grandparents that maybe wouldn't have been shared with me otherwise. And I think I've always looked at it as like, oh, that's kind of a struggle to get to know a whole person. But it's also a gift. Like it's also, and I think with Golden Girls watching it, and it's been a while for me watching it, post-COVID gave it some new relevancy to me as far as it being aspirational and just how lucky you could be to age like that.
Totally.
it was like special to watch in that. I was like, they're the OG pod, you know?
Yes.
That's so
You know?
perfect.
Yeah.
And there would have been an episode on them all getting their vaccines.
Oh
And
my
there's
God.
some debate about the vaccines and so on.
Blanche would have like a kinky mask.
Yeah.
They'd be like, not that kind of mask, Blanche.
She'd have cuffs too.
Right.
Yeah.
There is I used to cry every day on my birthday. I would cry on my birthday.
I always cry on my birthday.
I
It's important
used
to me.
to,
Yeah.
and it
Oh,
wasn't
okay.
on purpose.
not?
I didn't like schedule it. It would just be like something would happen and I'd feel bad and I'd cry. And I stopped doing that when a close friend of mine passed away at the age of 24. And ever since then, I stopped crying on my birthday because I'm like, it is a gift to get older. I am so lucky to still be here. And also, how can I have Golden Girls as my favorite show and be sad about getting older? That makes no sense.
No, it doesn't
yes.
track.
You have to live what you preach. You got to
Yes.
practice what you preach. And if I'm going to tell people, like, these are women who still have a sex life, they still have friendships, they still volunteer, they still have communities. They're
They're
hilarious.
remarkable singles.
Yes, they are my role models. So I stopped crying on my birthday because it's just 1 year closer to being a Golden Girl.
Oh, that's
Beautiful.
wonderful. So
That's a chef's kiss. I didn't kiss anybody here. You guys at home couldn't see the chef's kiss.
She's lying. She kissed me.
I kissed her right on the forehead.
It was very, very sweet.
I just yelled into the mic. I apologize.
That's okay. Well, I want to
passionate.
finish. So one thing that makes Danielle famous is that she does Golden Girls trivia, as we said, once a month in West Hollywood. You don't have to live in West Hollywood to enjoy it. We're going to do 3 rounds of Golden Girls trivia.
Sure. You want me to do it off the top of the dome?
I think you should do it off the top of your dome, given that we are not, we are not
It's really great seeing you use like fun slang.
off the dome.
Dome is a funny word. It's just a
I missed
funny
that one
word.
generationally.
Yeah.
I think that's a Boston thing. Remember earlier I was
Oh,
like,
yeah, that's
people always
definitely
call
a-
me
yeah.
on my Boston
Yep,
slang.
yep.
I've never heard it called dome anywhere else.
Yeah. That is just a funny word.
It's also a slang word for oral sex.
Yep, that I did
Okay,
know.
well, let's
Okay.
keep it with the
Okay.
former, not the latter. But yeah, look, we are. Chances are, I'm going to strike out totally on this. But let's
okay, so
let's
this is
have.
like game show style.
I think we should
Okay.
do it as a little bit.
Okay.
Let's phrase it as a question. Then, if we can't answer it, you can answer it, and it'll give the listeners a moment to pause if they want and think if they have the answer.
Okay, here we go.
Okay.
Question number 1. In what city do the Golden Girls live?
Oh, I know this one. They live in Miami, and they live on, I know this, an imaginary street, Franklin Street.
Richmond
Street. Shoot.
But good job knowing that it is a
Nice.
fictional street in Miami. It's not a real street.
Yes.
I love the Miami vibe. I love the aesthetic of their apartment. I love the wicker. I love the pink. All great choices.
I hate that aesthetic. Ugh.
The banana leaves. I don't know if you saw Blanche's bedroom in any of these episodes, but it's covered in banana leaves, and so is my apartment. Love.
Okay.
Okay.
So it's set in Miami. That's fitting.
Yes,
Oh,
makes
if it
sense.
wasn't
Yeah.
it wasn't in Miami, it would need to be in like some other Sarasota
yeah, I
or
think
Fort
that adds to the
Lauderdale.
aspirational element of retiring to Florida. Yeah. Like that's, I think that makes it a little more aspirational. Like it's a destination and this is where they're living out their,
Yes.
Ready for question number 2? Here we go.
Yes.
Question number 2. Which European country is Sophia originally from?
Okay. I know this one.
Well, I know that she's Italian, specifically Sicilian.
Correct.
Okay.
Well done.
Excellent.
I saw you write down Italian.
Yeah, I wrote Italy down. I don't know, I wrote it down. I'm so proud of
I
myself.
wrote the boot shape.
I was really good. I was really good in school.
This is like the newlyweds game. It's like you flip your car.
Can we do a couple more and you can ramp it up in terms of the challenge?
Yeah. I mean, I can do one specific about the episodes you watched.
No, don't do
No,
that.
don't. That's a terrible idea.
Okay. Let's see. How many children does Dorothy have?
I'm going to write mine down.
Okay.
Okay. I've written mine down.
Yeah, I wrote mine down. Should I share?
I guess so.
Italy. No, 2.
I have 3.
The correct answer is 2.
Dang it.
We may have covered this in the beginning of this episode,
But I couldn't
too.
keep track of all the names.
Yeah. I'm kind of forgetting
Well, Sophia has 3 children.
Okay.
So good on you.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Dorothy has 2.
Okay. Both with Stanley.
Yes. Yeah.
Do the kids show up ever?
Yeah.
They do come in and out of the show?
Yep. Michael is a jazz musician and Kate is an interior designer.
Got it. Okay. All right.
I'm glad you didn't ask those trivia questions because I would have been like, I do not know their professions.
Can we do 2 more?
Oh, of course.
Okay, super.
Okay. Speaking of professions, where does Blanche work?
Ooh, I don't know.
I'm going to say a hair salon.
It's like some kind of organization. No, I'm thinking of.
He's laughing at you.
That was really broad. No, that was really
an organization. You park your car outside of it, and then you walk in the door and clock in.
10 points to Gryffindor.
Like a nonprofit or something. No.
The correct answer is an art museum.
Oh, I did not know.
Neither of us were close.
No, it wasn't even
Neither
close.
of us. I don't even know why I thought hair salon.
Oh, here's an easy one.
I was maybe confusing some of her charity work with what she did.
That's probably where you were going.
I think I went with that because she cares about her looks.
Yeah.
Like she's the most sort of put together sort of.
That's valid.
In that way.
Here's an easy one.
Okay.
What is the name of Sophia's retirement home? Wow. They look baffled.
Well, I'm baffled.
Is it Golden Palace?
We weren't supposed to say that.
No, you weren't allowed to say
I'm
it anymore.
Felt like my one chance.
No fair.
I don't know. I have no idea.
No?
I don't know.
Shady Pines.
Oh, yeah. That's
So there's a common catchphrase of Dorothy's where she goes, Shady Pines, Ma.
Yep.
It's like a threat.
Yep.
I see.
Behave yourself, Shady Pines.
Yep.
Got it. That's outstanding. So before we close, I want to ask a question. This is of both of you. A, Danielle, because you're obviously an expert on this, and then B, Jen, because you know TV so well. Why has this show never been rebooted?
I have some theories.
Right? We're rebooting everything. Malcolm in the Middle is coming back.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's exciting.
Okay. So, and admittedly, I did a little bit of research.
By the way, I did not prep either of them on this question.
No.
You threw this out to me at one point.
Oh, it came up in conversation.
It came up in conversation.
Okay.
And I had guessed, I bet that it's in the works. That was my guess. Because one thing is that you have to do it right. It's going to take time. It's going to take the right attachments.
Talk about a lot of pressure.
And it's not,
I think that the fans have no interest in a reboot. I think we would riot. I think it would be catastrophic. The only way I would ever want to see a reboot of the Golden Girls is if it's done with drag queens.
Oh, that's a fun idea.
Yeah.
They did. So during COVID, there was a black cast. So
yeah, I watched that.
Gina Prince Blythewood. Was that fun?
By the way, Malcolm in the Middle has been rebooted with a black family.
Oh,
Yep.
nice.
Yes.
Yeah. It was fun, but it's just...
Tracy Ellis Ross. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. She played Rose.
Yep.
And they read a script. They read an episode that was actually written by Stan Zimmerman.
I was going to say, I couldn't find who wrote it online. It's Gina Prince Blythewood
This was a
is
live,
the
like
director.
a live taping,
but I didn't know
kind
if
of
they
COVID
wrote
style.
It was on
original
Zoom.
script.
Yeah.
Got it.
They did like a table read. So it was an episode, I think it was called The Flu. And I think that's the one they did.
that's
And it was written by Stan Zimmerman, who was a guest on Dr. Cheesecake.
Oh, cool.
And actually, speaking of Stan, he wrote a pilot that is so funny. And I really hope it gets made. It's called Silver Foxes. And it's about 4 gay men who live in Palm Springs together.
Oh
So
my gosh,
it's
I just came across a TikTok that I love. They're called The Old
I
Gays.
follow them.
They're brilliant.
They're
I love
incredible.
them.
I
Yeah.
sent that to Stan.
Yep.
But so there was that. There was Hot in Cleveland, which was similar.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think the fans want a reboot of the Golden Girls. Maybe like a one-off like they did with All in the Family. You know, they did a live episode of All in the Family.
Yes.
But
Okay.
I
just
think
don't think
it
it's
is
wanted.
something that needs the ingredients of a bit of time. I will also say I found this online.
Okay.
Not saying that's officially in development, but I know that at least a dozen hours of meetings have been had, right? Jennifer Aniston said,
That's interesting.
give it some time, and then Lisa, Courtney, and I could reboot the Golden Girls and spend our last years together. You're going to hate this. on wicker furniture.
Yes, indeed. My goodness.
So I wouldn't be surprised, and I think maybe with some time.
And an A-lister like that.
I don't hate that as much as I thought I would. I thought I would be like...
By the way, I would like that more than I liked Friends.
Yeah.
Which doesn't hold up as well.
No, it doesn't. Agreed.
The writing isn't as strong.
You know what else?
You know what?
topics
There's a
aren't
reason
as
we're not talking about Friends on this episode.
You know what else
That's
I gotta say? And I love 90s television. You know what absolutely holds up?
The Nanny.
The Nanny.
I knew you were going to say
The
that.
Nanny.
Okay.
It holds.
We're losing listeners right now. People are dropping off.
It's so good. It's so good. And a single gal.
Yep.
I mean, this Mary Tyler Moore holds up as a single gal.
Yep.
The Nanny holds up as a
We
single
always
gal.
just want to know. We want to hear more from him every time.
I think it's great. And I think we need, as I said, role models. And this podcast is designed to expose people to real role models, people who are really living remarkable lives as solos. But in the meantime, people have to rely on fiction. Mm-hmm. And I think that this is obviously a wonderful show. Jen, I want to thank you for joining us and for doing your homework, even better than I did. Danielle, thank you so much for doing this. This is really exciting and fun. And I think we should really thank the most important people here, Dorothy, Rose, Blanche, and Sophia.
Completely.
And the work that they have done as fictional characters to, I think, inspire people to think about other ways to go about living as they get older.
Some funny elderly women doing some heavy lifting for us.
I am so grateful to be on this podcast today. I'm really happy to meet you. I just wanted to say thank you to both of you for having me and letting me talk about my favorite thing in the world. And I feel like I shouldn't have listened to an episode before I got on here because now I'm like your fan. And I hope I wasn't too starstruck.
One new fan. One new fan.
But it was terrific. And I'm really happy to be a part of this. So thank you.
Awesome.
Cheers. I'm actually recording right now. Danielle, what did you have for breakfast this morning? And how do you say your last name? And can I say AKA Dr. Cheesecake?
You are more than welcome to say AKA Dr. Cheesecake. My name is Danielle Soto. And for breakfast, I'm ashamed to tell you, I had funfetti cake.
Amazing. It's great.
Potato
cake.
chips.
Oh, you are a solo.
And Cheetos. And this Dunkin' Donuts iced coffee.
But it's black, though. There's no cream or sugar, so that's healthy.
There's a shot of espresso because I wanted to be on for you.
It's a red eye.
Jen, what did you have for breakfast?
This morning I had a string cheese, 3 cups of coffee, and some dried mango.
3 cups?
Yeah, I had a lot of coffee this morning. I slept for 9 hours and I woke up and I was like, I'm so tired.
Do you want to go halvesies on a nutritionist?
Thank you for listening to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. For more about our guests and show notes, go to petermcgraw.org. Please subscribe and share with your single friends.